right, hello, good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Gattman. I'm the Wildlife Assistance Biologist for the Southwest region for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I'm going to be talking to you guys today a little bit about coyotes in Florida, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This particular presentation was actually produced by Marty Main. He's one of our leading coyote researchers at UF, the University of Florida. And just a little bit about me first, my position. Hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense in the context of the presentation. As a wildlife assistance biologist, it's my job to deal with the public directly and help them resolve a lot of their wildlife conflict issues that they have. One of our main species that we deal with are actually bears. That's generally our #1 species, but a very close second are coyotes. And I'm sure you guys have probably had your own personal experiences with coyotes, and you could probably imagine why we talk about those guys a lot. To get into it a little bit here, first, when we're talking about coyotes, obviously we got to consider is how did coyotes get to Florida in the first place? You know, a few hundred years ago, coyotes weren't in Florida, and one of the main reasons came through the eradication of wolves, both the red wolf and the gray wolf. More specifically in Florida, the red wolf. As you can imagine, coyotes and red wolves share very similar prey sources, similar food sources they're going to seek out. So again, as wolves were eradicated, that meant a lot more food was available for coyotes. And another reason that coyotes were benefited by the eradication of wolves is that wolves will actually prey upon coyotes when found in their territory. Especially, like I said, the red wolf was the one that we had in Florida. It was actually extirpated in the 1920s, and coyotes were found to start moving into the panhandle around the 1960s. Another aspect that benefited coyotes in their range expansion is actually the conversion to an agricultural landscape. Obviously, as Florida has become very highly developed over time, as a lot of these lands were cleared out for homes, for grazing, or just for agricultural activities, this became very beneficial for coyotes. Coyotes tend to like really wide open spaces, and so do a lot of things that they eat, like rodents, rabbits, even the agricultural items themselves, fruits and vegetables, and we'll get into that a little bit later with some of the gut content studies that were done. Now, a little bit, like I said, the history of the spread of coyotes in Florida. As you can see our nice, beautiful map of Florida. As I said, they started making their way into the panhandle in the 1960s. Brady and Campbell actually did a study in 1983 that found that coyotes had made their way into these 17 counties, obviously into the panhandle a little ways and starting to make their way down toward Orange County, Lake County. Wooding and Hardesty also did a study a few years later in 1990 and found that coyotes were in all of these counties, much more obviously, had made their way a good ways into South Florida. Marty Main, again the gentleman that actually produced this presentation, did a survey in 1997 to 99, found that coyotes were also in these 2 counties. He also did some carcass data as well, picking up roadkill animals, things like that, had added on an additional 4 counties. And then finally, through personal communications, reports that were taken, sightings, photographs, Marty Main also found that coyotes were in fact in every single county in Florida, all 67. One of the interesting observations was in 2011, it actually found that the furthest southern observation was in Key Largo. Basically means that coyotes are either swimming out to these areas or using bridges like us. Not exactly sure which one, but we know that they are all the way down that far south. And another thing to note as well is that Key Largo is actually the location of the largest feral cat colony in Florida. So a little coyote biology, you get to know them a little bit. Obviously, you guys probably know coyotes are omnivorous and highly adaptable. They're considered to be generalist omnivores, which essentially means that they can and will eat almost anything. And again, I'll be talking about that a little bit with our gut content study as well. Adults on average are ranging from 25 to 40 pounds. We know we get lots of reports that they're much larger, but they're really a fairly small to medium-sized animal. On average, their home range is going to be anywhere from about 15 square miles or so in natural areas, but in urban, more dense areas, especially we get a lot of reports from areas like Pinellas County, Hillsborough, where it's very highly developed, that's going to be about 3 square miles per family group. This is the difference comes in the natural areas, these animals are going to have to wander a little bit farther to find a regular source of food, whereas in urban areas, basically where people are, there's an abundance of food, whether that be garbage, pet food, bird seed. Again, basically you name it, it's likely that a coyote ate it at some point. They do mate in the winter and have their pups in the spring. On average, they're having about 6 pups or so. Again, a lot of that depends on food availability. If there's lots of food, they're probably going to have more pups. And if there's very little food or not much available, it's likely that that litter size is going to go down. And the interesting thing with coyotes is within their family groups, both parents actually take care of the young. And we get a lot of reports of that, of residents seeing 2 adults with pups, teaching them to hunt and things like that. Now, the diet study I've been talking about, again, we knew that coyotes were eating all kinds of stuff, and FWRI wanted to go out there and really find out what they actually were eating. These were some preliminary results that were taken of about the first 90 coyotes or so that came in. As you guys can see, looking up over here, we've got mammal. Again, not surprising, right? We've got our small mammals, 31%. We've also got vegetation up there. This is talking about really green, leafy type stuff. Again, omnivores, these are the things that they eat as well. Now, one thing to really note here, though, is anthropogenic makes almost 10% of this pie graph, which I think is actually a pretty large percentage. I don't know if you guys would have thought it would have been so much. But again, compared to some of these other things that they're eating, it's a pretty large chunk. And again, some other things there as well, insects, herps, and some unknown items as well. Now, just as a heads up, the next few slides are actually going to be photos of things that were found inside the coyote stomachs. It's nothing too graphic, nothing too icky looking, but just as a warning before you guys start looking here. So this first photo is actually dog food that was found in a coyote's stomach. Again, pretty obvious anthropogenic source there. No way to tell if the coyote was actually being actively fed the dog food or if it just happened upon it being left outside. That's kind of what I'm hoping for as opposed to the actual hand feeding. Our next photo here actually happens to be cooked chicken. Again, unsure if this coyote was being hand-fed this chicken or if it was found in garbage. Who knows? Tough to tell. The interesting thing about that particular photo with the cooked chicken is that it was actually from a coyote that was hit by a car in Pinellas County. Again, as mentioned, Pinellas is a very highly developed area, so again, kind of showing that obviously coyotes are there and they're eating a lot of anthropogenic stuff. Our next photo, I think, is a fun one. This is actually the stomach of a coyote. It's that nice, beautiful purple color. That's not normal. And basically what that indicates is that coyote was likely eating American pokeweed. Makes this really nice, gorgeous purple color. I had never really seen anything like that up until this point, so pretty interesting. This one, as you guys may recognize, is in a McDonald's butter wrapper. The interesting thing about this, obviously, we know that coyotes are eating garbage out there, but this one was actually hit by a car in Ocala National Forest. So, I'm not so familiar with Ocala National Forest. I haven't quite made my way up there, but I imagine there's not a slew of McDonald's located around. So basically what that's showing us is that coyotes can and will find these anthropogenic food sources. They're available. We've got here a mini egg wrapper, again showing that they do eat these trash sources. Don't know if the eggs were in there at the time. Maybe they were for that coyote. Now this particular photo is actually one of my favorite photos. As you guys might be able to tell, it says that there's a total of 47 small mammals that were all found in one coyote's stomach. The cool thing about this also is that coyotes generally digest their food in about 5 hours. So basically what that means is that this coyote ate every single one of these small mammals in the 5 hours at least before it died. So I think that's pretty crazy to think how many of these little things that they can eat in such a short period of time. This last couple slides, we've got some deer remains. I'm not exactly sure how they established, but they found that these deer remains were likely scavenged. So again, showing us that coyotes actually will eat carrion and things like that. Again, side by side with the trash bag. So we've got some natural food sources and some unnatural. Got here some palmetto seeds and aluminum foil. Again, showing a little bit of that mast and vegetation that they'll consume, but somehow still found some aluminum foil in the process too. This is our last photo, and I think one of the most interesting as well. If you guys can see, it's a pile of insects, and I don't know how well you can see the card there at the bottom that describes these insects, but this is actually a pile of roaches. Yeah, it's gross, right? But it's interesting, right, that these coyotes are eating them and that they actually ate that many, which I think is kind of cool. Obviously, we're sensitive to cockroaches, at least I am in Florida. I think they're pretty icky, so I support this coyote eating cockroaches. Now we're talking a little bit before, like I said, the weights of coyotes, on average being 25 to 40 pounds, and they actually did weigh these coyotes as they were coming in. These results from 149 of them, as I said, the other study was from the preliminary results of about 90 coyotes. And as you guys can see right there in the middle with our average, we got 25 to 30 pounds, and there was actually one individual, it was one male that was right at 39 pounds. And that's it. That's about as big as they get. The overall average is right at about 28 pounds. So the interesting thing is, talking to residents, we get a lot of calls that say, man, I saw a 70-pound coyote. It's pretty crazy. Probably not. Might have been, a little bit of a bigger coyote, but unlikely that it was either a coyote or it was actually that large. Now, the good. What's good about coyotes? Are they beneficial for our ecosystem? Is there some kind of services that they're providing? One is obviously the aesthetic values of wildlife. I mean, look, it's super cute, right? These are the reasons that people come from all over the United States and all over the world to come check out our natural landscapes and the animals that inhabit them. Scenes like this are incredibly endearing and, really draw people into finding a love and a passion for wildlife and for our natural resources. Another thing that's really cool that they do is control of smaller predators. So we've got foxes, possums, raccoons, rats. All of these things, coyotes are helping to control their population sizes. As mentioned with the extirpation of the wolves, these guys' populations were going unchecked until the coyotes came in and started helping control that a little bit. And because they're controlling those other species, it's actually helping to protect some of our threatened and endangered species. Obviously, if there aren't raccoons out there to take all of these, endangered birds' eggs, then they're going to be able to survive a little bit better. Especially a lot of our threatened and endangered species generally are occurring in more natural areas. As I said, for coyotes, on average, it's about one family group per 15 square miles, whereas when you're looking at a species like raccoons, it's on average about 25 individuals per 1 square mile. So basically what that means is, while there may be one coyote family group out there eating some of these species, it's not going to be quite as severe as the amount of raccoons that could be out there. And the coyotes are probably going to choose maybe those raccoons, hopefully, over some of these other guys. Now the bad. Are there bad things about coyotes? Do they compete with some of our natural predators? First, obviously, we've got the panther, obviously a big concern in Florida, something that we worry about daily and want to make sure that these guys are doing well. So do coyotes compete with them? Obviously, we know that they do consume similar food sources. Both panthers and coyotes will eat feral hogs, they'll eat deer. Obviously, coyotes generally are going to be younger individuals, as opposed to where panthers could potentially take adults. Difference habitat-wise, they're not really interacting with each other much. Like I said, coyotes like those nice wide open spaces. They're found on golf courses, open fields, places like that. While panthers like a lot of that more heavily forested cover. They're not as comfortable being in urban areas, whereas coyotes are thriving in urban areas. We also know over the past few decades that both panthers have been increasing in their population size, and coyotes have increased their coverage area of Florida. So if they're both succeeding, then it's unlikely that they're directly competing with each other and that coyotes are negatively affecting the panther. Another species, obviously, we have to look at are bobcats. Again, they're a little bit more similar in size to coyotes, more likely to be in similar areas, and obviously are going to eat probably a little bit more similar food sources as compared to coyotes. And there was actually a study done. Marty was actually involved with this study as well. This is in Avon Park, and they put collars on some bobcats and coyotes. Now, if you guys look here, if you're looking at the red are bobcats, blue are coyotes. These more heavier, kind of cross-hatched areas are going to be your core areas for bobcats. Where'd it go? There we go. And then your dotted areas are going to be core range areas for coyotes. Now, if you're really looking at those core areas, you're going to notice that they really don't overlap much. They butt right next to each other. They're side by side, but there's not much overlap in those real core areas where they're spending most of their time, where they're denning, where they're caring for their young. So again, this also leads us to believe that, again, they might be living right next to each other, but it's unlikely that they're negatively affecting each other. Again, as mentioned, coyotes do prey upon our threatened and endangered species. They don't know what's threatened or endangered, but because they actually do prey upon the other predators of these species, it's unlikely that they're having that strong of a negative effect. Now the ugly, human conflicts. This is a huge part of my job. Speaking with the public, obviously you can see this coyotes hanging out there on a sidewalk. Obviously as coyotes get more and more habituated, they get closer and closer, and there's lots of food sources, people start to get concerned. They say, oh wow, it ate a cat or something like that. So what's gonna happen next? What could possibly happen with this coyote and with me being so close to home? Now first, also we've got livestock depredation. Obviously that does occur. It's not quite as large a part of my job, but it's something we can talk about later in the interest of time if you guys have any questions. Now urban coyotes and pet loss. Obviously I touched a little bit on it, someone saying, hey, it took my cat. What's gonna happen as a result? What happens when these coyotes get more and more interested and possibly escalate their behavior? And what we did to kind of try to help residents understand what the real statistics are as far as coyote attacks, bites, scratches, is to compare them a little bit to dog attacks, obviously animals that we interact with every single day. A 46-year study was done on coyotes both in the US and Canada and found on average that attacks, bites, scratches only occurred about 3.5 times per year. Most of those cases actually occurred when coyotes were actively being fed by people. These were not random attacks, and there were 2 fatalities over that 46-year period. When you're comparing that to domestic dogs, they cause about 1,000 ER visits every day, 5 million cases that require medical treatment per year, and 176 fatalities over a 4-year period. That's not a 40-year period, that's only 4 years from 2010 to 2014. So basically what that's showing is that as much as we live in and amongst these coyotes, as pervasive as they are in Florida, they're really not biting people, they're really not attacking people, at least based on what we've got. And I think 46 years is some pretty solid data that we've got there. Now the ultimate question that we always get is, can we get rid of coyotes? And ultimately the answer is no. And for many reasons. Eradication efforts across the country, I'm sure you guys might have heard about it out west, have been generally incredibly expensive and overall ineffective. The coyotes only continue to expand their range. And this is mainly because of their breeding dynamics. Again, if there's more food available, then they're gonna have more pups. They're territorial with high replacement. Obviously that means you could remove a coyote or 2, but if that food's there, it's just a matter of time before another might move in. Obviously, they're incredibly adaptable. They're highly intelligent animals, and basically what all that means is that they're here to stay. Now, just some quick facts about coyotes, some things that I've already talked about a little bit, and some I may not have. Again, they're weighing about 25 to 40 pounds on average. They do occur in every state, in nearly every large city. I think the most interesting report that I got was that coyote in New York City. I don't know if you guys had heard about that one. Obviously, they're in every county and every large city in Florida as well. Attacks by coyotes on humans are exceedingly rare. Coyotes will take cats and small dogs. We'll cover a little bit about how to manage that. And coyotes can carry rabies like many mammals, but it is rare. It's unlikely. Just some advice. First, you never want to feed coyotes or any wild animal. We've actually had some changes to our wildlife feeding rule that actually makes it illegal to feed coyotes in Florida. Again, as mentioned, those attacks that occurred, some of them actually were related to feeding, so this is one of the reasons we've actually adapted our feeding rules as well. You do want to prevent access to garbage and pet food. These are very strong attractants for coyotes. There's no attractants there. There's not really a lot of reason for them to hang around and come up close. It's important to keep cats indoors, have dogs on a short leash or in a well-fenced yard. Again, these are easy ways that residents can protect their pets, and again, make sure that coyotes aren't coming around looking for a free and easy meal. And it's also important to follow hazing recommendations to consistently frighten coyotes away. Generally, coyotes should be very wary of people, but we always recommend, yelling at them, throwing things in their direction, spraying them with hoses. It's okay for them to be out there, but obviously we don't necessarily want them to think that we're that good of friends. And if a coyote does approach, lift small pets and children off the ground and be prepared to defend yourself. Obviously, you wouldn't want to run. That could potentially elicit that predator-prey response. But again, situations like that are incredibly rare as well. Now, obviously, ultimately, it's up to you guys to decide whether coyotes are good, if they're bad, if they're ugly, or if ultimately they're just trying to make it in a tough world. Obviously, we know coyotes are, like I said, very adaptable, incredibly intelligent, and they're pretty much showing us that they're not really going anywhere. And that's it.
Lindsay, do you have any data on sea turtle predation by coyotes?
I'm not aware of any data. It doesn't mean that we don't have it, though. I'm wondering if maybe the people that are doing more of the sea turtle research might have that. I don't have any of that particular data, though.
I know we've had that problem in Sarasota County. What about other wildlife? Just anecdotally, I know I see way fewer armadillos lately. Do you know, are they consistent predators of armadillos?
I feel like, honestly, with coyotes, if they can find it and they can eat it, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wouldn't doubt that at all. I mean, realistically, if it's easy, sure, why not? I mean, we have gotten reports from residents before where they will ask us about a particular species, and we'll be talking about coyotes, and they say, well, we have noticed that there are not as many rabbits anymore. So we assume that, similar things just depend on what's in the area.
Lindsay, what about coy dogs or coy wolves?
We do get questions about coy dogs and coy wolves. We haven't found any direct evidence of that being the case, that they actually are interbreeding, especially not in Florida. So, yeah, exactly. I blame a lot of those on husky mixes and stuff like that, because I actually have received photos that someone said, oh my gosh, this coyote, and it turns out to be somebody's husky. I'm sure that's on the loose and causing havoc. I think we got one over here. Question? I don't know if we've got time.
When we first moved to Florida, the deer that we saw were a lot smaller than what we're seeing now. Could that be due to coyote predation? And if so, are the key deer in danger when the coyotes move down farther south?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that potentially being a selective pressure. I haven't heard of any particular data on that causing them to be larger. It's possible. As far as the key deer, it'd probably really depend on how far down in the keys you're talking about. Coyotes obviously made it into Key Largo, but that's about as far. Again, basically, if it's small enough for them to take, it's possible for them to take it. Again, a lot of it's all learned behavior when you're talking about prey sources for coyotes. Again, some coyotes take pets, but not all. Some coyotes take livestock, but not all. It really just depends on that particular individual. I know it seems very broad and vague, but that's kind of how it is with coyotes. They're, like I said, they can and almost will eat anything. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.